What do you think sounds wrong about this scene? Of course, nothing is incorrect when it comes to creative mediums like sound design, but this moment does something extremely unorthodox. Take a listen. It's the wind. You can clearly hear the sound of wind hitting the microphone, a sound that is generally avoided and actively removed in post-production. Wind noise is often considered distracting and can make a film sound unpolished. There are even things called windshields that go for upwards of $280, designed specifically to shield microphones from the wind and capture clean audio. So why was the wind noise left in? And why did it work so well? Sometimes the quality of the sound matters less than the impression it leaves on the audience. The work of director and sound designer Alberto Mielgo is a perfect reflection of this philosophy. I absolutely love this scene. It's part of a chase sequence and my favorite sound moment from Mielgo's 2019 animated short, The Witness. The film explores themes of toxic relationships and cycles of violence. But even without much context, this moment clearly conveys a sense of haste and chaos. The character acting already builds tension, but the addition of harsh wind noise amplifies the frantic energy. The camera angle is intimate and slightly off-kilter, and since the wind overpowers other sounds, it could also symbolize the character's overwhelmed mental state. It's an incredibly effective use of sound, but I can't stress enough how unconventional it is. Here's what the scene might sound like with a more traditional approach. The wind is smoother and more controlled, making it sound more polished overall. But I think it sounds boring, and I much prefer the impact of the original. Which is crazy because again, leaving in wind noise is practically unheard of in professional sound design. It objectively reduces the audio quality, yet Mielgo deliberately chose to keep it in, prioritizing the emotional effect over technical polish. He embraces the purity of unclean sounds because it provides a more authentic experience. He references it outright. The unprocessed wind noise is such an on-the-nose reflection of his vision. It's raw and unfiltered, literally. Even applying a simple high-pass filter, which cuts low frequencies, would have cleaned it up significantly, but his unconventional style leaves a stronger impression on the audience, which is exactly his goal. Wind noise isn't just an outlier in The Witness either, it's a recurring stylistic element in his films. Take this moment from his 2021 short, The Windshield Wiper, which explores love through a series of vignettes. Instead of heightening chaos, wind adds rawness and intimacy. The moment is relatively quiet, and the audience is encouraged to absorb the atmosphere along with the characters. It feels almost like a candid phone recording, where the wind noise wasn't cleaned up, thereby making it feel more authentic. It skips post-processing because it doesn't need it. Love is raw, it's unfiltered, and imperfect. And the audience subconsciously feels that. It's said that emotion and effect are fundamental to what makes films artistically successful, rhetorically powerful, and culturally influential. Mielgo's work perfectly embodies this sentiment. He describes his work as being based in Impressionism, an incomplete visual and auditory experience that leaves room for interpretation. His visuals are experimental and driven by emotional impressions rather than a pursuit of perfection. His sound design follows the same philosophy, prioritizing impact over polish. He stated how he aims to push the boundaries of animation and cinema with his work, and it affects audiences by defying expectations and ensuring his films leave a lasting impression. For me at least, The Witness lingered in my mind for a solid 2 weeks after watching it. It was just so powerful. Okay, so Mielgo doesn't just reject polished aesthetics. He also disregards lifelike depictions, especially in his sound design. From here, I want to rapid fire some insane scenes that totally ignore technical conventions. Foley is an essential part of sound design. Everyday sounds like footsteps, creaking doors, and cutlery are all recreated in post-production, acted out using props. The goal is to sync them accurately to the visuals and make them sound natural. You hear this rain? No, you don't. It's actually bacon. But it sounds like rain in context. It doesn't matter what the source material is as long as it sounds right, because that's the point of sound design. Cinema sound doesn't always have to conform to objective reality. Rather, it aligns with a reconstructed reality shaped by the visuals and narrative. While sounds should maintain a sense of naturalism and accuracy, these variables are ultimately dependent on the world represented on screen. Sounds sound right as long as they feel believable within the film's unique world. Mielgo's art style being so unique gives his sound design flexibility to experiment. His visuals are expressive and exaggerated, so the sound design can afford to break convention without feeling out of place. He recognizes that his animation looks so real that it begins to feel weird and uncanny. This applies to his sound design as well. Take his 2022 short Jobii, which follows a deaf knight and his encounter with a siren. The Foley for the film is recorded at an extremely close range, capturing every minuscule detail. It's hyper-realistic, and almost sounds too real, so clear and larger than life to the point that it's overwhelming. Mielgo intentionally exaggerates the sound to serve the story. He states that
when you are full on inside of a forest, it's very rich in sound, versus what a deaf person might hear, and I did my own interpretation of what this can be.
He achieves this by making the outside world sound deafeningly loud, which contrasts starkly when we switch to the knight's silent perspective. The harsh sound design makes it borderline distracting, but that's the point. When the knight's hearing is eventually restored in the story, the sound design reflects the hypersensitivity he may feel. High frequencies are increased and sounds move around in stereo. The armor sounds have an echo to them, and there's an annoying high-pitched ringing introduced. The sound design is so cluttered and distracting, which disorients the audience. But again, that's the point. It reflects the knight's experience of struggling to process sound. It's exaggerated, but it sounds right, because sound design doesn't have to be accurate to real life, as long as it reflects the narrative's reality. The siren's scream is also incredible in this film. It's been processed with distortion, and the chopped up vocals give it an artificial quality. There's occasionally a Morse code-like electronic beeping mixed in, which makes a striking contrast to all of the sounds we've heard up to this point. Against the natural sounds of the forest and hyper-realistic Foley, the scream almost sounds electronic, standing out because it feels so unnatural. From an audio standpoint, it starts to function more like music. Typically, non-diegetic music exists outside of the natural world. Characters can't hear it, and it holds an elevated position separate from the action. But the scream blurs this boundary. It actually blends in and out of the soundtrack, exploring a strange limbo state, where it's neither fully diegetic nor entirely non-diegetic. This gives the siren an unnatural presence. She's able to interact with the music itself, something characters normally have no control over. In doing so, the scream is given an almost supernatural quality, which reinforces its hypnotic effect. Just as the knights are helplessly drawn to her voice, the way it demands attention positions the audience as one of her victims, caught by her deadly song. Maybe I'm reading too far into it, but I think it's genius. Mielgo's sound design also plays with editing techniques in unconventional ways. Take this scene from The Witness, and pay attention to the man's breathing that should be coming from behind the door. He sounds like he's right there, in the room with the girl. Realistically, breathing shouldn't be heard this clearly if it's coming from behind a door. It's almost as loud as the girl's frantic breaths, and it's like they're competing to be heard in the mix, heightening the sense of unease. Normally the sound would be filtered or lowered in volume to mimic the door blocking sound. It sounds like the man's keys are treated this way since they sound muffled, but the breathing is unnaturally brought to the foreground. Mielgo breaks conventional rules to make the threat feel more imminent and heighten tension. Here's another one. This next moment is from the windshield wiper and intentionally uses peaking audio. Peaking occurs when a recorded sound is too loud for a microphone to handle, causing distortion. It's avoided at all costs, and dialogue is even re-recorded entirely because peaking can't be fully fixed in post. That first yell feels so visceral. The distortion makes it feel more tangible, like a raw, real-life recording rather than a polished film mix. This elevates the scene so much more because it feels more grounded and relatable. It doesn't matter that it sounds bad because it leaves a stronger impression. Plosives, which are harsh bursts of air from sounds like P and B, are another example of unconventional audio. They sort of sound like wind noise, distracting but strangely intimate. And Mielgo likes to record dialogue at extreme proximity, which frequently results in these low-fidelity artifacts. Normally, pop filters are used to soften these sounds because they break immersion. It makes dialogue sound like it was recorded on a microphone, rather than existing naturally. But again, Mielgo leaves them in.
Ce culoare vezi când te gândești la tine?
Albastru.
Da. Și când te gândești la mine, ce culoare vezi?
Roșu.
Și când te gândești la noi, ce culoare vezi? Spune. Ce culoare vezi?
I especially love this scene because the plosives don't break immersion, but rather enhance it. They make the conversation feel more raw, as if we're positioned directly between two people in bed, or listening to a private voice memo. It feels so authentic and intimate, which is so interesting because plosives aren't something we hear in everyday life. They're a byproduct of microphones. So to realistically depict this scene, the dialogue should be cleaned up to reflect how we naturally perceive speech. Despite being technically wrong, by keeping the plosives, Mielgo makes the scene feel more authentic. I'm just speculating here, but these last two moments from the windshield wiper seem to tap into the audience's own experiences. Consciously or not, everyone is familiar with the sounds of peaking and plosives, even if they lack the technical terms to describe them. Through home videos or personal recordings, viewers subconsciously connect to the amateurish audio quality, and by extension, on-screen moments feel more personal. This shared familiarity allows the film to transcend the screen, as its meaning shifts with each viewer, who instinctively draws from their own experiences. This vastness reinforces the story's message about the countless ways love manifests in the modern age. The imperfect audio enhances emotional intimacy at the expense of realism, but that's what makes it so creative. Mielgo seriously understands the importance of sound, and all of his works show a mastery of the craft. You can only break the rules if you have a deep understanding of them. His films embrace imperfection to create a stronger emotional impact. and every choice he makes strives for impression over polish or the traditional idea of realism. I hope this video conveyed just how powerful sound design can be, and why I adore Mielgo's work. Thanks for indulging in my rant. Anyway,